Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your Chief Security Fanatic here, and today I am just grateful because fortunately for us, the extremists in this world don't understand really how the internet works. And here's what's going on. This is actually some recent news from the last 24 hours or so. The FBI here in the United States just arrested Seth Aaron Penley, age 28, from Texas for allegedly planning to basically launch a bomb attack against an Amazon Web Services data center in Virginia, the state of Virginia. Now, Mr. Penley was attempting to buy C4 plastic explosives from an undercover FBI agent, and obviously this explosive would have been used to destroy the data center and what he believed would kill about quote-unquote 70% of the internet. Now, according to the press release by the Department of Justice, and I quote, Seth Aaron Penley, 28, was arrested on Thursday after allegedly attempting to obtain an explosive device from an undercover FBI employee in Fort Worth, Texas. He was charged via criminal complaint and made his initial appearance in federal court before U.S. Magistrate Judge Jeffrey Curtin Friday morning. Now, basically the plot that was uncovered by law enforcement basically revealed itself when he laid that out on a forum online called My Militia using the moniker Dionysus. Now, Dionysus, quote-unquote, stated that he was planning to, quote, conduct a little experiment that he said, quote, would draw a lot of heat and could be dangerous. He was planning basically to cause death and disruption, according to his own words. Now, in late January, Mr. Penley started communicating via Signal, that is the secured and encrypted messaging app, an app I actually recommend for privacy, and we just found out Mark Zuckerberg actually uses Signal as well outside of WhatsApp. He doesn't use WhatsApp because, quite frankly, it's not secure, so Mark Zuckerberg is using the competing product to his quote-unquote secure thing. But I digress, because Mr. Penley started communicating via Signal with another confidential source in January who told the FBI that Mr. Penley was planning basically to attack a data center of a prominent tech company. So in March, this confidential source introduced Penley to an undercover FBI agent posing as an explosives supplier. In February, Penley shared with the confidential source a handmade map of Amazon's Virginia-based AWS data center, revealing essentially the locations for his attack. Mr. Penley basically chose that data center because he believes that's where the web servers are hosting services for the FBI, CIA, and other federal agencies. He was planning to kill the quote-unquote oligarchy currently in power in the United States. Now, on April 8th, Mr. Penley met with that undercover FBI agent to get the explosive devices, which were inert. Basically, they sold him fake C4. Now, the agent showed Mr. Penley how to arm and detonate the devices, but when the defendant loaded them into his car, he was immediately arrested by FBI agents who were monitoring, obviously, this fake delivery of these inert devices. And if he is found guilty, he basically is looking at 20 years in federal prison, up to 20 years in federal prison. And this is what we have to contend here basically within the United States right now. A group of individual extremists posting about bomb threats, both this one and a couple of years ago, if you recall, a Florida man named Caesar Sayoc basically attempted to mail bombs to who he perceived were enemies to then President Trump. So Nancy Pelosi got one, Chuck Schumer got one, and on and on and on. I think even Bill Maher was supposed to be getting one in round 2, if you know him from HBO. And that doesn't include the shooter manifestos that we see posted online on websites like 8chan, now called 8kun, from everything from Norway's mass shooting to New Zealand's Christchurch mass shooting to the more recent one in El Paso, Texas, where a man walked in with an AK-47 and killed 20 people of Latin heritage, basically believing that the Great Replacement theory, if you will, that a lot of white supremacists believe. So this is a very serious issue that needs to be addressed while still basically preserving the freedom of expression, which is a rather narrow tightrope to walk right now. And on top of that freedom of expression issue, we actually have a movement in this country, including some politicians, to actually make it harder for that expression to be free online, which is the repeal of Section 230. Section 230 is by no means perfect, but without it, all of the platforms would have to ratchet up their filtering. If you think that Facebook and Twitter are censoring speech right now, you wouldn't believe how far that they would have to be forced to go without the protection of Section 230, which basically alleviates them from liability. Now, in this particular case, what I'm talking about here, blowing up an Amazon data center will do nothing to stop the internet, nor would it knock out the perceived 70%, according to this person. Not even 1% of the internet would go down if this AWS center was basically turned into rubble. For those who don't know, most organizations that have an account basically on an AWS or Microsoft Azure, the competing platform, and others like IBM Cloud, et cetera, including every single federal agency listed by this extremist, they all have their data replicated between 2 or more data centers continuously. That's part of federal law for a federal agency. In this way, if one data center goes down, let's say the internet lines get cut or whatever, they keep going online by routing to the next closest data center. All this person would have done was probably killed a bunch of Amazon employees and any FBI agents that were actually connected, if assuming that's true, to the Virginia Amazon data center, assuming that's where their data is stored. They would have been routed to like the Maryland data center or the New York City data center or maybe one in downtown DC, something like that. Basically, they would have kept on rolling. It really wouldn't have affected them. Backup for government's agencies, as I mentioned, are federal law. And so blowing up a data center would have done nothing except a whole lot of damage and a whole lot of death. Now, I think this speaks, though, to a bigger issue that we have in society right now. What do we do about the extremists? It's one thing to pop off online anonymously and talk about bringing down the government or, anything else, including racism and just horrible, horrible things online. But it's another thing to actually attempt to buy explosives and actually try. And how many of these crazies out there aren't talking to undercover agents because they didn't have a friend that turned them in? Maybe they have friends that say, yeah, let me get on this action. Let's find an actual explosives guy or a weapons dealer or something like that. That's a huge consideration. And so by virtue of that, we have a lot of problems with online being a needle in a haystack because you can communicate on any platform anywhere. Fortunately, a lot of these guys have no idea really what anonymity is, although there's a lot of places out there where they can go get training. If they're talking on Signal, they understand they should be encrypting their messaging apps to keep it away from prying eyes like their internet service provider and somebody else. But that's a huge problem because law enforcement, quite frankly, can't be everywhere. And we've got a lot of disenfranchised people right now that are angry and arming. And I think that's a concern. This person is going to be one example of I unfortunately think many. So we're going to see where this goes. I don't have all the magic answers, on this right now. I'm obviously glad, as I think the vast, vast, vast majority of us are glad that obviously Amazon didn't get bombed. I don't care what you think about Amazon. The last thing I want to do is see their employees killed or have their property destroyed in an extremist attack. But this is what we're talking about. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'd love to know your thoughts. I don't think there's an easy answer one way or the other, but this has to be addressed. This has to be identified because, quite frankly, as soon as they start understanding that it takes multiple data centers, we may see coordinated attacks against an Amazon or a Microsoft or an IBM or other massive provider in the United States, let alone around the world. And obviously, this is a huge problem. So I leave it up to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but that is your news of the day. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, everyone.